Well, this morning I did a report where I said I was going to be speaking. All of these are being kept short about how there is going to be a Gitmo reboot and how that is. And we're going to discuss what has been going on over the years and also to bring up some points, some statements, some facts for us to be reminded of and to look at. So that's what we're going to look at today. Now, I did a report and I'm going to go ahead and read that to you. And I would really very much like to discuss this. This is not just feeding you information. This is reminding you of things that are public source that you can fact check anything and everything that I say and start thinking for yourselves and making your own decisions on what you think is happening. Okay? Don't just listen to me or anyone else. Fact check. Always, always. Okay, I am going to share my screen. Okay, we're coming here as we always do all the time. That if you want to do any fact checking about what's going on in Gitmo, here's the Office of Military Commission's website, mc.mil/home.aspx. I will be putting this in the taskbar. Come here to find about anything and everything having to do with Gitmo, including obtaining transcripts, finding out who's there, the calendar, where you can view these live, which has been the case ever since January of 2019. You can go to Fort Meade Military Base. They have a special gallery in there for the public to be able to watch the exact same trials that are going on in Gitmo. It has a 40-second delay. It is live streamed via CCTV. Going over to the c-vine.com website, c-vine.com website, this is where we do all our reports. We do have here a section if you are so inclined to help us with expenses, whether it's through reporting or travel or whichever. We do have a place there. Become a site member to receive some regular newsletters, and that will happen. Let me see. It's down here where you can log in to become a member of the website. Everything's free. There's no paywall. It just helps us. Okay, so we're going to get right to today's story. And we are going to discuss the two main reasons a Gitmo reboot is imminent. Okay, today is July 21st, 2023, and this is the second video I am doing today. This morning, I concluded part one of our report as to the official reasons for canceling all of the many Gitmo commissions for the next 3 months. The official reason, in my opinion, is a continuation from the same playbook for the last many years of continuations and or cancellations. Will this be the final time they overplayed their hand? You decide, and let's discuss in the comments section in your observations. For discussion, I will point out two major reminders about what President Trump said and left in place when he was in office. It's almost like Trump knew what was going to happen. The man who historically seems to be multiple steps ahead of his enemy detractors has played an ingenious chess move. Let me explain why. Reason number one, Trump opened up all of Gitmo commissions to the public in January of 2019 to be viewed live from Guantanamo Bay via CCTV with a 40-second delay on Fort Meade in Maryland. That has always been available, but for some reason, very few, if any, people show up to watch these. Well, we've been there and we've been watching it, and we'll go from there. But these have been and continue to be available to you. Okay, these commissions happened throughout most of 2019 when CFIDE volunteers attended these and unofficially reported on them utilizing transcripts for fact-checking purposes on social media. We watched month after month of legal suppression, delays, setting a date for tribunals, going to trial, judges stepping down, and KSM et al. Defense team plus legal defense for the victims and family members for 9/11 continually fighting for information access that was kept classified, including fighting for release of Saudi official names as alleged true orchestrators of 9/11 that were kept under seal by then Attorney General Bill Barr in September of 2019. Side note, and this is after the attorney Jim Kreindler was been fighting since 2012 in federal court to have that name released. And 2019 was D-Day, where Barr had to make that decision whether or not to keep the name classified or declassify it. Hindsight is 2020 because in the year 2020, revelations culminated 1 year later in January as all the dots were connected. Now, keep in mind, remember, September 2009, Attorney General Bill Barr kept those names classified. A couple of months later, in January of 2020, that's where things really seemed to get interesting. Okay, it's like President Trump knew what was going to happen. Future proofs past. He knew about the diversions of false information of politicians and Hollywood celebrities being held in Gitmo broadcasts by shills and ultimately fooling the masses. The only way to overcome this was to show the public what was really going on by opening Gitmo trials to the public. The Office of Military Commissions worked with us as part of the public watching these proceedings in Fort Meade by explaining why American citizens could never be held, tried, convicted, let alone executed in Gitmo as per not only Gitmo regulations, but also the American Constitution. Believe me, we asked and we argued. We also, I mean, the wonderful sensationalized stories that things were going on behind the scenes. Well, things may be going on behind the scenes, but we're not meant to know what they are. So for them to broadcast it right there should have been a great big red flag. Okay, so the only reason people learned the truth was because we were there to physically watch and report on social media unofficially. Transcripts were provided for the public as a fact-checking tool. It wasn't something we were just making up. It was available to you. You also could have been there. And with these trials coming up, well, I digress. I'm going to get back to the report. The KSM et al. 9/11 defense team in January 2020 laid out all the reasons why everything was stalled in court after 20 years, which happened subtly, slowly, over time, and included the multitude of added illegalities perpetrated by the government, but never addressed. Judge Shane Cohen at the time had the difficult decision to make on whether or not to throw the entire 9/11 proceedings out of court, as stated on the very last day of the January 2020 pretrials. This was a momentous statement that he made. And the things that Cheryl Borman put out there as the lead defense attorney and her team were mind-boggling. It laid everything out in one place of what has been going on for years with the certain areas of the FBI, CIA, etc. in the government. It was that exact time the 4-year privately funded study coming from the University of Alaska Fairbanks had completed the forensic analysis of the free fall collapse of Building 7 on 9/11. Side note, Building 7 collapsed later in the day and it wasn't hit by any aircraft. The forensic analysis was completed by a team of engineers led by Professor Leroy Halsey, emeritus, and the damning results clearly showed Building 7 collapsed by controlled demolition. That's kind of huge, don't you think? 3,700 licensed architects and engineers peer-reviewed Professor Halsey's study, signed a petition in agreement with his forensic analysis, which vehemently disputed the accuracy of the NIST report. That NIST report, as a side note, is what is being used in closed proceedings with the KSM et al. What's going on. And they had also, as a side note, had asked for samples of the rubble from the 9/11 rubble and were denied this, basically stating to the defense team, you have all you need with the NIST report. So they, along with Professor Halsey, was not allowed access to samples of the rubble for forensic analysis. Now, I continue on. Building 7 was a smoking gun, and the official NIST report diverted away from that. 2 weeks later, in February of 2020, I hope you're following along with these timelines. January 2020, February of 2020, now Shane Cohen suddenly quit, citing concerns for his family's welfare. Okay, so Judge Cohen, the guy who said he wasn't going anywhere until he got everything completed, without warning, after he stated just 2 weeks earlier he had to make the hard decision of whether or not he was going to throw the KSM et al. 9/11 trial out of court. Well, 1 month later, in March 2020, Gitmo commissions canceled for 2 weeks to flatten the pandemic curve and have continued with cancellations or continuations for the most part piecemeal up until this point. Side note, Cheryl Borman, the learned counsel who led the defense team in January of 2020, exposing, on the record, government shenanigans never addressed, was advised she was then being placed under investigation in January through March 2022. A couple years later, all of a sudden, when they were going to start the trials again, she was notified that she was under investigation. It was at this point she had to quit because of not being able to adequately defend her client with this cloud of investigation hanging over her head. Miss Borman stepping down ultimately led to the KSM et al. Plea deals being negotiated as we speak in closed classified proceedings beyond the public purview. Now, again, side note, had she gone ahead to continue representing her client and the defense, even if they found out, you know how fast things move, that they found that she was guilty, there was no problems, it just completely messed with the credibility, and that right there would have caused some major problems with the trial and anything that she put out. So it was a no-win scenario. But then a sudden flurry of commissions activity started again now for the months of June through December 2023. Sabine had taken it upon himself to organize and promote the public coming en masse to the special gallery on Fort Meade to watch these Gitmo proceedings live streamed via CCTV from Guantanamo Bay. We even arranged to have their large auditorium available for the public, as the original small room wouldn't suffice for the amount of people coming. The number of truther influencers were also attending as witnesses beginning in August. In June, Sabine used the report from Carol Rosenberg, an official New York Times reporter physically on Gitmo, of the exact information coming from the pretrial since she was there. We shared these with our following because we couldn't be there at that time. Her reports were exemplary and double-checked against the transcripts. For a while, official reporters worked together with citizen journalists to spread Gitmo truth with the help of good people at the Office of Military Commissions. It was wonderful working together. Keep in mind, the Canestraro report was a classified leak a couple months ago, which validated what was released in January 2020 in the KSM pretrials. In brief, part of that report stated as follows. Okay, as a side note, if you have not read or looked at the Canestraro report, it is incredibly important that you take the time to do this. Now, the title, and this is through the floridabulldog.org, is where the report originally came from, and states, ex-FBI agents accuse top CIA, FBI officials of 9/11 cover-up. And this is by Dan Christensen of the floridabulldog.org. Weeks before 9/11, an angry New York FBI agent nearly came over the table at CIA officials who were blocking him from obtaining intelligence about two al-Qaeda terrorists who would soon take part in hijacking an American Airlines passenger jet and crashing it into the Pentagon. Someone is going to die, the counterterrorism agent wrote in a bitter email shortly after the 2001 encounter. That astonishing account and many others are contained in a sworn declaration by Donald Canestraro, an investigator for the Office of Military Commissions, part of the Department of Defense's Military Commissions Defense Organization. It is dated July 20th, 2021. Canestraro said in a brief interview with Florida Bulldog that he is part of the defense team for Guantanamo detainee Amir al-Baluchi, we call him in Seavine the money man, who is a Pakistani citizen who is awaiting trial with 4 other men accused of planning the 9/11 attacks. His declaration includes the results of his interviews with, listen to this, 11 ex-FBI agents, 2 ex-CIA agents, a CNN investigative journalist, former Deputy National Security Advisor Richard Clark, and former Senator Bob Graham, Democrat, Florida, co-chair of Congress's Joint Inquiry into 9/11. Okay, you can read the entire report here. I have a link on our website to this report where you can go also read this in its entirety. Okay, the second reason why we may be looking at a Gitmo reboot. Second reason, President Trump was refusing to shut Gitmo down. In his 2008 run for White House, President Barack Obama promised to shut down the prison for suspected terrorists in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, and on his second full day as president, he issued an executive order to close it within 1 year. Obama's opponent, John McCain, wanted Gitmo closed as well. So whoever won the presidency, it appears closing Gitmo was an agreed upon agenda. President Biden has taken up the mantle, and he continues the legacy slowly. Gitmo originally contained over 800 AUMF, standing for Authorized Use of Military Force Prisoners, which is a form of POW put into place by Bush. These prisoners were never charged for crimes, but were captured al-Qaeda terrorists. They all have been repatriated elsewhere, except for a few stragglers that remain looking for repatriated homes. In a previous 2017 interview with New York Times reporter Carol Rosenberg made this statement, quote, Donald Trump said that, he, during his campaign, that he intended to load the prison up with some bad dudes. He's not closing that prison. He wants to add more prisoners to it. So there's a real question about where they're coming from, who they are, and what will be the authority to detain them. And, bringing in new prisoners from a global battlefield, from, let's say, perhaps Iraq or Syria, they'll be completely different than than the men who are there now. Okay. That is a quote, and that's her observation at that time. So things have not changed. Trump reiterated those statements in 2018 in a 2018 report from The Guardian, which shows here Guantanamo Bay. Donald Trump signs executive order to keep Guantanamo Bay open. In his State of the Union address, Trump said he directed James Mattis to keep the prison camp open, reversing Obama's policy. Donald Trump has signed an executive order to keep Guantanamo Bay prison camp open, reversing the policy of the Obama administration. Fast forward to 15 years to today. Wash, rinse, repeat. Continued multiple months of cancellations with potential KSM et al. In September because of a July prison COVID outbreak in the middle of summer. But they still just can't seem to close that pesky military prison down. And it certainly isn't for want of trying. Could this be Pandemic 2.0 with additional years of cancellations and lockdowns for their next trick? If they can't close Gitmo down, they will continue with dramatic diversions elsewhere until the interest in justice for 9/11 dies with barely a whimper. Unless there is a Gitmo reboot or the people stand their ground and say no more. And then I also add, or both. A reboot would be similar fix as to when a computer no longer functions correctly, but this time attribution as to Gitmo, I'm speculating as to an incarceration upgrade of global crime syndicate prisoners who are orchestrators of crimes against humanity. As a side note, if there's American perpetrators or whatever, they will be tried in federal court unless something else comes up, but we have to watch that.
All right, something has to give. Yesterday, I saw a hint of that. Last night, Trump's Truth Social account went dark and then came back up again in under an hour. It almost gave the impression of a reboot. Multiple influencers immediately noticed the Trump void and tweeted about it and stated one of his last truths before his disappearance was, "It will be done quickly." Okay, we have a statement here from Liz Crokin. President Trump's True Social account went dark tonight. It's back up. However, this is one of his last truths before it happened. And again, it states it will be done quickly. There were multiple people stating the same thing. It will be done quickly. So it was like a flash, a red flag to check this out. I personally believe that this is to be true. It will be done quickly and without warning. A few examples: look at the Georgia Guidestones. Peace with Korea and the end to the Korean War after 50 years. Trump meeting Kim Jong-un in the demilitarized zone. The Supreme Court end of Roe versus Wade, giving back the decision to the United States. There are many other situations too, and it happens without warning. There was no prediction of dates that this was happening. Most people had no clue it was even coming. We may not know when, but as in the saying of Sun Tzu, let your plans be dark and impenetrable as the night, and when you move, fall like a thunderbolt. Okay, folks. I think we are culminating to an end, and I know you've heard this and you're sick of it. I get it. But they can't keep going like this much longer. They're going to try and probably do 2.0 pandemic. I don't know. I may be wrong. I hope I am. But somehow, some way, they're going to try something. And folks, you need to have some decisions to be made on whether or not what you're going to do is stand your ground. It's going to have to come from within you as an individual. But as I made in another report, it seems like we have this universal trigger coming up from within when we look at what happened with Target and Bud Light and, what is it, Ben and Jerry's ice cream, and what's been happening in some of the schools. People are just taking it upon themselves without being organized in any way, shape, or form and just saying, nah, nope, I'm done. And just doing it and coming together, the silent majority. Okay, our next report, I think you're going to be very interested in, which has to do, as a reminder, for the executive order that Trump signed in December of 2017. It was an emergency declaration. Good day, everybody.